Emily Carson wasn't expecting anything unusual that night. It was just another quiet Thursday evening in early fall. The sun had gone down early, the wind had picked up outside, and she had curled up on the couch with a book and a blanket. Her husband Josh was working late again, which had become more common lately. She didn't question it. Not at first. The house was still peaceful. Until the knock. It came softly once. Then again. Not urgent, but enough to pull her from her thoughts. She frowned, set her book down, and stood up. It was past 9 p.m. Who could be visiting at this hour? She walked slowly to the front door, cautious. The porch light flicked on as she opened it. Standing there was Ryan Monroe, her old friend, her almost something from years ago, the man who had disappeared from her life without warning, and now stood on her porch like no time had passed at all. She blinked. "Ryan," he gave a small smile. "Hey, His voice hadn't changed, still deep, steady, familiar. Her heart skipped once. Then again, "What are you doing here?" she asked, stunned. "I'm in town for a few days," he said. "I drove past your street and, I don't know, I just stopped." Emily hesitated. "It's been 7 years. I know." They stood there in silence for a moment, the cool air wrapping around them. Then she stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" He nodded. Inside, everything felt heavier, like the air had changed. Ryan looked around slowly, taking in the living room, the photos on the wall, the small, warm space that now belonged to her and Josh. "You look good," he said. "So do you." He sat down, hands resting on his knees. Emily brought him a cup of tea, the only thing she had warm. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed it to him. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been thinking about the past lately. About you." She looked away, unsure how to respond. Ryan had been part of a different chapter of her life before she met Josh, before she settled into the quiet, safe version of adulthood. Ryan had been chaos and comfort all at once. A love that never quite got written. "Why now?" she asked. "I don't know," he said again. "Maybe because I finally had the courage." They talked for over an hour. About old memories. About the people they used to be. About the nights they stayed up late sitting on park benches, dreaming about everything. Then Ryan asked quietly, "Are you happy?" Emily wasn't expecting the question. She froze. "Josh is a good man," she replied carefully. "That's not what I asked." She looked at the floor. "I'm comfortable, but not happy." "I don't know," she whispered. The truth sat in the room between them, unspoken but loud. Emily had built a life that looked perfect on paper. A stable marriage, a cozy home, a predictable routine. But deep inside, something had gone quiet. And now Ryan had shown up not with a plan, not to ruin anything, but simply by being there. Had shaken something loose. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said. "I just needed to see you." Emily nodded, unsure of what to do with the flood of old feelings. "I should go," Ryan added, standing up. She followed him to the door. As he turned to say goodbye, something shifted. Their eyes met, and it felt like they were standing in 2 timelines at once, the present and the one they never got to live. "Good night." She opened her mouth to reply, but the words didn't come. Then, just as he stepped outside, he turned back and said, "I never stopped wondering about you." The door closed softly behind him. Emily stood there for a long time. That night, when Josh came home, she didn't mention the visit. He kissed her cheek, asked about her day, and told her he had meetings all the next day. She nodded, listening, but her mind was far away, still standing on the porch. She didn't sleep well. The next morning, she found a small note tucked into her mailbox. It had no envelope, just her name and a short message. "Thank you for opening the door. If you ever want to talk again, I'm here." She held the note in her hands for several minutes, then folded it, placed it in her journal, and closed the cover. The next few days passed slowly. Josh was gone more than usual. Emily felt herself slipping into a strange in-between. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She hadn't crossed any lines. But her heart was awake. In a way it hadn't been in years. She started walking in the evenings again, alone, down old streets, past the places she used to visit before life became about routines and responsibilities. She wasn't chasing anything. She just needed to breathe. One evening, she found herself near the coffee shop where she and Ryan used to sit and talk. And without meaning to, she walked inside. He was there as if he'd been waiting. Their eyes met, and neither of them smiled. It wasn't a reunion. It was a recognition. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said. "I wasn't sure I'd come." He gestured to the seat across from him. She sat this time. Their conversation was quieter, more serious. They talked about regrets, about timing, about how sometimes the people you think you've forgotten live quietly inside you for years. "I'm not asking you to leave your life," Ryan said, "but I need you to know I loved you. I still do in some way." Emily closed her eyes briefly. "That's not fair. I know. But it's true." She didn't run. She didn't cry. She just listened. "I'm leaving Sunday," he added. "Back to Denver. My old life's still there. But if you ever wonder, if you ever feel like your heart isn't done with us, ... I want you to know I'm not going to disappear again." When she left the coffee shop, the wind had picked up. The air smelled like coming rain. That night, she lay beside Josh, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was steady, calm, the same as always. She reached for his hand under the blanket, but it felt distant, familiar but far away. Something inside her had cracked open. Not because she didn't love her husband, but because something buried had risen again. A piece of herself she thought was gone. It had started with a knock, a quiet, simple knock, and now she was standing at the edge of a choice that could change everything. Emily didn't tell anyone she saw Ryan again. Not her sister, not her best friend, and certainly not Josh. Some part of her felt guilty, even though nothing had happened. But another part of her, stronger, deeper, felt alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. The days passed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her had changed. She started paying attention to small things. How quiet the house was when Josh wasn't around. How often he looked at his phone during dinner. How their conversations felt short, polite, almost rehearsed. One evening, Josh came home later than usual. He kissed her on the forehead, then went straight to the bedroom, saying he was exhausted from meetings. Emily sat at the kitchen table long after he'd gone to bed, staring at nothing. She wasn't angry. She was just tired of pretending that everything felt the same. The next day, she called in sick to work and drove out of town. No destination, just open road. Her phone buzzed twice. One text from Josh, another from Ryan. She ignored both for a while. Eventually, she opened Ryan's message, "Leaving tomorrow. No pressure. Just wanted to say goodbye in person, if you want that." She turned the car around. They met at a small overlook outside the city, somewhere quiet, with trees turning orange and gold around them. He was already there, leaning on his car, looking out across the hills. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said softly. "I wasn't sure either," Emily replied. They stood side by side for a while, not speaking, just breathing. It felt like the world had slowed down for them. "I'm not trying to make this harder for you," Ryan said. "I just needed to be honest." Emily looked at him. "Why now?" "I guess I realized life doesn't wait," he said. "I couldn't keep carrying the what-ifs." She nodded slowly. "I've been doing the same for years." They sat on the hood of his car, legs dangling, watching the sun lower itself toward the horizon. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. "I don't think I ever stopped loving you," Ryan said. Emily didn't respond right away. Her heart was full and aching all at once. "I think I buried you," she whispered. "Because that was easier than wondering what could have been." He looked at her. "Do you regret it?" She paused. "I regret not saying goodbye." The silence between them held more than words could explain. Finally, Ryan turned toward her and said, "I'll go. I won't text again. I won't try to pull you from your life. But you needed to know. You deserved that." Emily's eyes welled up. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Thank you." When she got back home, Josh was in the kitchen. He looked up from his laptop. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked casually. Emily smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Just needed some air. They didn't talk much that night. Josh was distracted. Emails, phone calls, work stress. But Emily couldn't stop thinking about how easy it had become to live beside each other without really being with each other. She noticed the distance more now. The way he didn't ask how her day was, the way she didn't offer. The quiet between them was comfortable, but not warm. 2 days later, she found a receipt in Josh's jacket pocket, a fancy restaurant. A date and time that didn't match his work schedule. She stared at it for a long time. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't quicken. She just sat there, holding it, feeling like the ground under her had shifted, but not in surprise. In recognition, later that evening, she asked Josh, "Have you been happy lately?" He looked up, caught off guard. "Yeah, why?" she shrugged. "Just feels like we've been distant." Hesitated. "Work's been crazy." She nodded, not pressing. "'Kay." That night, she didn't cry. She just lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the question of loyalty wasn't about cheating. It was about attention, about presence, about how easy it is to lose someone slowly without even noticing. The next morning, Josh left early. No kiss, no note. Emily sat at the kitchen table, drinking her coffee slowly. Then she picked up her phone and texted Ryan, "Are you still in town?" 3 dots appeared, then stopped, then appeared again. "I was supposed to leave yesterday. I stayed, didn't know why." She replied, "Now you do." They met later that afternoon at a park near the edge of town. Ryan looked surprised, but not excited. He seemed cautious, respectful. "You okay?" he asked. Emily nodded. "No, but I'm getting there." They walked together slowly, saying very little. It wasn't about attraction anymore. It was about peace, about truth, about showing up when it mattered. Finally, Emily said, "I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want." Ryan didn't push. "You don't owe me anything. I know," she said. "But I think I owe myself honesty." They sat on a bench. People passed by, laughing, walking dogs, holding hands. Emily felt small and big at the same time. "I don't think I ever let myself admit that I wasn't happy," she said. "Not to anyone, not even me." Ryan took a breath. "I saw it in your eyes the other night. They didn't make any plans. No promises. No dramatic goodbye." As the sun started to dip, Emily stood. "Take care of yourself." "You too," Ryan said, and she walked away. Not toward a new romance, not toward her old life, but toward clarity. That night, when Josh came home, she was waiting at the table. "We need to talk," she said. He froze slightly, then nodded and sat down. She placed the receipt on the table. "I'm not angry, just need you to be honest with me." Josh looked at it, then at her. For once, he didn't come up with a story. He didn't lie. "I'm sorry," he said. She nodded. "I think we've both been gone for a while." The conversation that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It's good. It was the kind of conversation that ends something gently because it already ended slowly over time. They decided to take space. No blame, just truth. That night, Emily packed a bag and went to her sister's house. She stood in the guest room window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. Breathing deeply. Her phone buzzed once. "Ryan, whatever you decide, you were always more than a memory to me." She didn't reply. She didn't need to not yet, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. Emily woke up early in her sister's guest room. The morning light came in soft through the curtains. The silence was different, now healing, not hollow. She sat at the edge of the bed, holding a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood slowly wake up. It had been 2 days since she left home. 2 days since everything changed. She hadn't spoken to Josh since the night they sat at the kitchen table and let go of the life they'd built. There were no harsh words, no screaming. Just quiet truth. Sometimes love fades without noise. That morning, Emily opened her journal. She hadn't written in months, maybe years. She began with one sentence. I forgot how to be honest with myself. Words followed. About the girl she used to be, the woman she had become, the roles she had taken on wife, employee, peacemaker, without pausing to ask if they fit. She wrote about Ryan, about the past they shared, about how his return didn't break her life. It simply reminded her she still had a heart beating beneath the routine. She didn't write about regret. She wrote about awakening sister Claire came in around 10 a.m., holding her own cup of coffee. You okay? She asked gently. Emily nodded. Getting there? Claire sat beside her. I know I've never said this, but I always felt like you dimmed a part of yourself when you married Josh. Emily looked down. I think I did too. Claire placed a hand on hers. You don't owe anyone your silence, Em. You deserve to want more. That hit her deeply. For so long, she had told herself she should be grateful. Josh wasn't a bad husband. They didn't fight. But being in a relationship where you feel invisible is its own kind of loneliness. Later that afternoon, Emily drove out to the lake just outside town. It was where she used to go before she got married when she needed to think. The sky was overcast. The water calmed out. She sat on a bench, phone in her lap. Ryan's message from a few nights ago still unread. She opened it again. Whatever you decide. You were always more than a memory to me. She closed her eyes. This wasn't about choosing a man. It was about choosing herself. Her phone buzzed. This time, it was Josh. Do you want to meet and talk? I think we need closure, she agreed. They met at the same coffee shop where he had first asked her out years ago. It felt symbolic, like their story had come full circle. Josh looked tired but calm. I've been thinking, he said. We lost us a long time ago. Emily nodded. We just didn't want to admit it. I never meant to hurt you, he added. I know, she replied. But that doesn't mean we weren't both unhappy. They talked for over an hour. About the good times, the hard seasons, and how easy it was to drift apart when neither of them fought to stay close. In the end, they agreed to separate peacefully, respectfully. There were no tears. Just a quiet understanding. That night, Emily drove home alone. She stepped into the house that used to feel like a shared life and now felt like a chapter ending. She packed slowly, not everything, just the essentials. She wasn't running. She was letting go. She spent the next week staying with Claire, taking time to breathe. No contact with Ryan, no pressure to make big decisions. Just space. One morning, Claire asked, Are you going to see him? Emily didn't answer right away. I don't want to fall into another relationship just because I left one. I need to know who I am without someone else. Claire nodded. That makes sense, but don't close a door just because you're afraid. Later that week, Emily finally called Ryan. I wasn't sure I'd hear from you, he said, voice gentle. I needed time, she said. Of course. I agreed to meet for coffee one more time. No expectations. Just two people reconnecting honestly. When she walked in, Ryan stood. He looked relieved. Not eager, just ... open. You look lighter, he said. I feel lighter. They've talked about the last few weeks. About everything she had learned about herself. About what she wanted. I'm not ready to jump into anything, she told him. But I do want to explore what's between us slowly, with honesty. Ryan smiled. That's all I ever wanted. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't push. He simply nodded, letting her lead. And for the first time, Emily didn't feel like she was caught between two lives. She felt like she was building her own. The next few months were quiet but full. Emily started taking art classes again, something she'd abandoned after college. She volunteered at a local library. She spent more time with her sister, reconnected with old friends, and discovered how much joy came from simply being herself again. Ryan was there, but not consuming her life. They went on walks, shared stories, built something slowly, no pressure, no rush. It felt honest. Real. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset over the lake, Ryan said, I'm proud of you. For what? She asked. For choosing yourself. She smiled. It's strange. I thought this story started with you showing up. But really, it started when I opened the door. He nodded. Sometimes the knock is just the beginning. Emily didn't know where the future would take her. She wasn't certain about forever, but she had found clarity, strength, and a quiet kind of love for herself. Maybe for him too. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was an honest one. And for Emily, that was more than enough. Ethan paced in his small apartment in Seattle, staring at his phone. His heart raced. He had promised himself he would not let things spiral again, but here he was, texting Sarah late at night. He loved her. He was sure of it. But something in his life felt incomplete. Earlier that day, Sarah had invited him to her mom's house for dinner. Her mother, Margaret, was warming and polite but reserved, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and a gentle manner. Ethan had always tried to make a good impression. Tonight, he walked into that house carrying a dessert, trying to appear confident, but inside he felt restless. Dinner started well. Margaret asked questions about Ethan's work, his plans, his dreams. Sarah smiled at him, squeezing his hand under the table. They joked about childhood memories, old trips Sarah remembered playing with her mother. The warm lighting, the delicate clinking of plates and glasses, everything felt ordinary, safe, comfortable. After dinner, Margaret suggested they all sit in the living room and have coffee. Sarah fetched mugs, and Ethan watched Margaret move with quiet grace. The lamp cast soft pools of light across her face. There was a moment, just a beat, when Ethan's eyes met Margaret's. She looked at him as though she saw something hidden, something he had been trying to hide even from himself. They talked about books, films, regrets, and hopes late into the evening. Sarah leaned in, sharing a laugh. Ethan felt a tension he had never expected, a sense that Margaret wasn't just playing the role of the host. She was watching him, studying him. Later, Sarah excused herself to fetch dessert from the kitchen. Ethan sat on the couch next to Margaret, and for once, the silence between them was heavy, not awkward, but full of unspoken thoughts. He wanted to ask questions. Why was she looking at him that way? What was shifting in the air? Margaret spoke first. Her voice was soft, steady. "You're different from the men I expected," she said. "You have something deeper." Ethan's heart thudded. He wasn't sure how to respond. He swallowed. "Sarah says good things about you," Margaret continued. Her gaze lingered. In that moment, Ethan felt the line between respect and something more blur. He knew the danger of thinking too much, feeling too much. He told himself to stay grounded. He would not betray Sarah. He would not cross a boundary. But as the night drew on, the lights dimmed. Sarah returned, carrying the dessert. Ethan noticed how the shadows danced across Margaret's face, how her eyes held a longing. He looked at Sarah, then back at Margaret, and sensed something shifting. Something unspoken waiting to happen. Margaret stood. Walking over to adjust a pillow for Sarah, she passed close enough that Ethan could feel her presence, and for a moment, their world narrowed. Just him, her, and the quiet room between them. He felt pulled, torn, and alive in a way he had almost forgotten. Sarah asked Ethan to pass dessert. He reached across Margaret's armrest, his hand hovering. Their fingers brushed lightly. The contact was tiny, almost accidental, but the weight of it settled on him. Margaret's eyes flicked up, acknowledging that touch, holding it just a moment longer than expected. Sarah laughed at something breaking the tension. Ethan exhaled, feeling the night shift around him. He looked at Margaret with something like regret and fascination. She gave a small, sad smile, then turned away to speak to Sarah. Ethan sat back, heart pounding. He looked into the corners of the room, saw familiar things, photos of Sarah and her mother, books on shelves, a quiet lamp. But nothing felt safe anymore. Secrets, desires, lines unspoken, they had stepped into the room with dessert and soft light. And now nothing would be the same as Sarah pushed her plate forward. Ethan forced a light laugh and joined her. But his mind raced ahead, wondering, what does one moment mean? And could it ever be undone? The days after that evening were filled with an uneasy quiet. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Margaret, the way she looked at him, The brief touch of her hand, the tension that had passed like a spark in the dark. He tried to focus on Sarah, who was busy with work and planning their upcoming weekend trip. But the memory of that night shadowed his thoughts. He told himself it was nothing, that Margaret was just lonely. Or maybe misunderstood, and that he had to stay true to Sarah. But emotions are never simple. Sometimes they sneak in quietly, like a slow tide pulling you further than you realize. A few days later, Ethan received a message from Margaret, unexpected and brief. "Can we talk? There's something I need to say." His heart skipped. He debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. He agreed. They met at a small cafe, one known for quiet corners and strong coffee. Margaret arrived first, looking different outside the comfort of her home, more vulnerable, yet still composed. Ethan sat down, nervous but willing to listen. Margaret started carefully, sharing pieces of her life, the loneliness after her husband passed years ago, the fear that Sarah might never fully understand her, the weight of watching her daughter grow up and change. Her voice softened when she talked about Sarah, how proud she was, how much she wanted her to be happy. But then she looked directly at Ethan and said, "I see you, Ethan. I see the man Sarah loves. But I also see the man who carries things hidden beneath the surface. You're tired. You want more than what you have." Ethan felt a mix of surprise and confusion. Did she know? Or was she just guessing? He swallowed, trying to find words. "I don't want to hurt Sarah," he said honestly. "I love her. But sometimes I wonder if love is enough." Margaret reached across the table, her hand briefly covering his. The touch was warm, human, but it sent a jolt through Ethan that he couldn't ignore. "Sometimes," she said, "love is complicated. Sometimes the heart doesn't follow the rules we set." They talked for hours about dreams they kept quiet, about what they wanted but felt afraid to ask for. Ethan felt strangely understood in her presence, feeling he hadn't expected from someone so close to Sarah. As the evening grew dark, the cafe emptied. They moved to a quieter table, the light low and soft. Margaret leaned in, lowering her voice. "You don't have to decide everything tonight," she whispered. "But don't deny yourself the truth of what you feel." Ethan nodded, caught between loyalty and desire. The room seemed to close in around them, and the world outside melted away. He wanted to reach out, take her hand and say yes, but he stopped himself. They parted that night with a fragile promise to keep talking. To be honest, even if the truth was difficult. Back at Sarah's apartment, Ethan felt the weight of what had begun to change inside him. He loved Sarah, but something in him stirred for Margaret, a feeling that was confusing and frightening. He tried to push it down, to bury it beneath the daily routines and Sarah's smiles. But fate has a way of forcing choices. One weekend, Sarah invited Ethan to join her and her mother for a small family gathering. He hesitated but agreed, wanting to be part of their world. The house was filled with laughter, familiar faces, and the aroma of home-cooked food. Margaret greeted him warmly, a look passing between them that held secrets. Later, when the others moved outside to enjoy the cool night air, Ethan found himself alone with Margaret in the dim living room. The soft music, the flicker of candlelight, and the quiet between them built a fragile tension. Margaret sat close enough that Ethan could feel her presence, her warmth. She looked at him with something unspoken in her eyes, a mix of sadness and longing. "Ethan," she said softly, "we are walking a dangerous path." He nodded, unable to speak. The room held its breath. Suddenly, the lights went out. The house plunged into darkness. In the silence, something shifted. Margaret moved closer. Her hand brushed Ethan's arm, a light, almost accidental touch, but filled with meaning. He turned toward her, heart pounding. And then, without warning, her lips met his in a quick, gentle kiss. The moment was brief, electric, and filled with everything they hadn't said. When the lights flickered back on, both of them pulled away, faces flushed, eyes wide with shock. They looked at each other, realizing the line they had just crossed. "What have we done?" Ethan whispered. The question hanging between them like a fragile glass ready to shatter. Margaret shook her head, a mix of regret and longing in her eyes. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I know this isn't over." Ethan left that night with a storm inside him, love, guilt, confusion, and a deep sense of longing he hadn't expected. He knew the weekend ahead would bring answers, but also risks. And so the forbidden had begun not with anger or betrayal, but with a single kiss in the dark. The days following the kiss in the dark were a whirlwind for Ethan. His mind raced with conflicting emotions: love, guilt, confusion, and an undeniable pull toward Margaret that he couldn't easily explain or ignore. Each morning he woke up hoping the moment had been a dream, yet the memory was vivid and real, lingering like a shadow over everything. He tried to focus on Sarah. She was kind and loving, the woman he had chosen to build a future with, but the ease that once came naturally between them was slipping away. Conversations felt strained. Smiles became forced. Sarah noticed it too. One evening she asked gently, "Ethan, is something wrong? You seem distant." He wanted to be honest, but the truth was too tangled and painful. How could he explain the kiss that felt like a betrayal and yet somehow a revelation? So he said nothing and smiled weakly, pretending everything was fine. Meanwhile, Margaret was not the same woman Ethan had known. She reached out more often, sending texts filled with care and subtle warmth. Sometimes she would invite him for coffee or a walk. Moments where their conversations deepened and the walls they'd built around their feelings weakened. Ethan wanted to resist, but every meeting drew him closer, and he began to realize that his heart was in more danger than he had imagined. One rainy afternoon, Ethan found himself at Margaret's house again. They sat together in the living room, watching the rain trail down the window. The silence between them was comfortable but heavy. Margaret broke it softly. "Ethan, I know this is hard. I don't want to cause pain to Sarah, but I can't ignore what I feel." He looked into her eyes, full of honesty and a quiet desperation. "I don't want to hurt her," he replied, "but I don't know how to stop these feelings. It's like everything I thought I understood about love is changing." Margaret nodded, her hand reaching out to cover his. "Sometimes life surprises us," she said. "Sometimes the people we connect with aren't who we expect." Ethan's heart ached with the weight of that truth. He knew they were standing at a crossroads, and every step forward or back would change their lives forever. Days later, Sarah's suspicions grew. She noticed the subtle changes, the lingering glances, the faint tension whenever Margaret was mentioned. One evening, unable to hold it in, she confronted Ethan gently. "Is there something between you and my mom?" Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. The truth was heavy, but Sarah deserved honesty. He took a deep breath and said, "There's been a moment. Something happened. But I love you, Sarah. I'm trying to figure this out." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "It hurts, Ethan, but I want to believe you." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Ethan's life. He spent hours reflecting on his feelings, trying to understand what love truly meant to him. He talked to Sarah with more openness, sharing his fears and doubts. Slowly, they began to rebuild trust, brick by fragile brick. As for Margaret, she stepped back, respecting Ethan's commitment, but never fully letting go of the connection they shared. Their bond became quieter, filled with unspoken understanding rather than action. In the end, Ethan realized that love is not always simple or neat. It can be messy and confusing, full of unexpected turns. But love also requires honesty, respect, and courage to face the truth even when it hurts. One evening, as the sun set over Seattle's skyline, Ethan stood beside Sarah, holding her hand. He felt the weight of what they had been through, but also hope. The past was a complicated story, but the future was theirs too, right? And in his heart, he carried a lesson that sometimes the hardest battles are fought within, and the bravest choice is to be true to yourself and the people you love.